They grabbed her backpack and pointed to the hallway. No warning, no explanation. She stood still, lips pressed shut. One teacher said, "This school has standards." She blinked but didn't move. They thought she was scared. She wasn't. Outside, a locked door waited. Inside, a voice whispered, "Your kind always makes it difficult." Then she reached for her phone. Not to call, just to record. She didn't know they had already erased her name from tomorrow's list. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. If you stand for dignity and justice for every student, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode will expose what this system fears most. The bell rang, but she didn't move. Her desk was still cluttered with notes, pencils, and a small brown notebook she always carried. She had just finished her presentation on black female inventors when Ms. Kellerman approached with that same clipped voice she used when quoting rules. "Tiana, you know this hair doesn't meet the code. You were warned." The classroom had thinned out, but a few students still lingered, whispering, exchanging glances, filming with their phones. Tiana looked down at her curls, wild and proud, the same ones her grandmother once called her lion's crown. She didn't answer. She just gathered her things. That silence, that refusal to engage, was taken as rebellion. Principal Hargrove had been waiting. He was already by the door when she stepped into the hallway. He didn't ask questions. "Your presence is disruptive," he said. "You are to leave school grounds immediately." She blinked. For what? He waved the handbook but never opened it. The secretary behind him wouldn't meet her eyes. The assistant dean nodded once, almost apologetically. This wasn't about hair. It was about the way she looked at them and didn't flinch. It was about the way her voice stayed calm when theirs rose. It was about the way her presence made. Their rules looked flimsy. She was escorted out the back entrance. The cameras facing the front gate would never see it. No letter sent home, no call to her parents. Just silence, locked doors, and whispers behind windows. Her phone buzzed. A friend texted, "They're saying you cursed out Miss Kellerman. You okay?" She didn't reply. She just sat on the curb, breathing. In the distance, she could hear the speaker in the auditorium announcing the start of the Parent-Teacher Council. Her name was still on the student honors list, projected behind the podium. No one knew she had already been erased. When she got home, the door was unlocked, lights off, and the living room unusually quiet. She placed her bag down carefully, almost mechanically, and walked straight to her room. Her phone hadn't stopped vibrating. She tapped the screen. There it was, a 30-second clip already circling social media, a shaky recording of her standing, silently while Ms. Kellerman spoke, followed by a jump cut and a voiceover. Local teen lashes out after being warned about dress code violations. She blinked. It wasn't even what happened. But the captions told a different story, and so did the comments. Some called her defiant. Some called her dangerous. A few said things that couldn't be repeated out loud. Hashtags appeared within minutes. The narrative had been written before the truth ever made it home. She scrolled through it in disbelief. The media machine moved faster than she did. Somewhere in another room, her mother's voice muttered through a phone call. Her father wasn't back yet. He had no idea. But everyone else knew. Her face was already attached to a headline. Her school ID photo had been pulled from the district site. And below it the words, "Disruption or Defiance." Outside her window, a car passed slowly, then stopped. The driver didn't get out, just stayed there, lights on, engine running. She pulled the curtain shut. Her email dinged. 3 colleges had withdrawn interest, citing behavioral incidents. She hadn't even graduated yet. She hadn't even spoken. But it didn't matter. The silence they hated at school had followed her home, and now it screamed louder than any voice she could raise. In the kitchen, the news played low on the radio. Her name was mentioned again, this time with a clip of Principal Hargrove quoting policy. Her mother turned it off before the sentence ended. Upstairs, Tiana just sat by her desk, staring at the folder labeled Letters of Recommendation. One of them was from Miss Kellerman. He returned home later than usual. No tie, no coat, just the weight of the capital still on his shoulders. The hallway light was dim. The smell of reheated rice lingered in the air. He didn't speak when he Saw her at the kitchen table, face lit by her phone screen, shoulders stiff like stone. He watched the video once, then again, then a third time without blinking. He didn't ask her what happened, he already knew. Not from the footage, but from the silence in her eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He just asked, "Who else knows?" Her mother replied from behind him, voice brittle, "Everyone, it's spreading like fire." He nodded once, then walked to his study, phone in hand. She followed, but stayed by the door. He didn't look at her as he sat down, flipped through his old contact book, and began dialing numbers. Not the public ones, the private ones. The ones that answered even at midnight. His voice stayed low. "I need a contact at the district, quiet, no press." The next call went to someone in a national newspaper. "I'm not giving a quote, just asking you to watch what's coming." Then a text to an old colleague in the Civil Rights Division. "Need preliminary review on public school disciplinary protocol. Urgent." Her mother stood in the hallway, arms crossed, afraid to step closer. "You can't go to war over a dress code violation," she said. He didn't answer. He was already sending an email marked confidential, attaching the policy handbook with 3 paragraphs highlighted. Tiana watched him type. Every key felt like a drum. She realized then, this wasn't about politics, not for him, not this time, it was personal. But he hadn't told anyone who he was. Not the principal, not the school board, not even the media. He didn't plan to. Not yet. Instead, he wrote one more email, this time to a small non-profit law firm downtown. Subject line: Unlawful expulsion inquiry, student minor, need quiet support. Then he leaned back, rubbed his temples, and said almost to himself, "We let them write the story first, but we choose how it ends." By morning, her email was locked. Her school account returned an error. When she tried logging into the district portal to access her scholarship applications, a message flashed across the screen. Account suspended pending review. She refreshed it 3 times. Same result. Her phone buzzed with a notification from a classmate. A screenshot showed an internal memo from the school principal marked confidential that had somehow leaked. It labeled her a disruptive presence and referenced repeated violations, though she had never received a single disciplinary warning before. Attached to the memo was a list. Her name, circled in red, appeared alongside a suggestion to inform potential transfer institutions. The school had flagged her record. She hadn't even applied for transfers, but they were making sure. No one would accept her if she did. On the news, Principal Hargrove stood in front of the school library, delivering a statement filled with polished half-truths. He spoke of dress code enforcement, campus integrity, and the importance of school values. Not once did he mention her name, but everyone knew. The camera panned to the banner behind him that read, "Pride and Progress." At home, her father watched in silence. He made no calls this time, just listened. Her mother paced behind the couch, fuming. "This will ruin your next election," she said. "They'll say you let your daughter become a symbol." He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled a worn envelope from a drawer. Inside was a photo. Her first day of kindergarten, same curls, same quiet strength. He folded it back and whispered, "She didn't become anything. She already was." Meanwhile, a blog post surfaced from a local education reporter known for aligning with the school board. The headline was brutal. "Senator's daughter sparks chaos, school officials under attack." The article quoted anonymous staff members who claimed she had screamed, threatened, even incited a walkout. None of it was true, but the article was picked up by larger outlets within hours. The comment section erupted. Her social media was flooded with slurs and threats. Even her middle school pictures were dragged into the fire. Tiana stayed in her room, lights off, curtains drawn, phone face down. In just 2 days, she had been transformed from honor student to political scapegoat. And no one had heard her speak a single sentence. She texted Amber first, no reply. Then Eli. His response came hours later and was short. "It's messy right now." She stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure if she should write back or just delete it. By evening, she knew. The silence wasn't by accident. It was coordinated. Eli's brother played varsity football. Amber's mum was on the PTA. Neither of them wanted to be tied to someone who had become a hashtag for all the wrong reasons. In the cafeteria group chat, messages had been deleted. Her name removed from the prom planning spreadsheet. She opened the school news app and saw a notice about the upcoming student protest against behavioral disruptions. No one had asked her to join. The protest wasn't about her, it was against her. That night, her mother received a call, not from the school, but from the local police department. Tiana had been listed as part of an unofficial student activist circle accused of organizing school walkouts. Her mother's voice cracked as she tried to explain, but the officer insisted on a meeting to clarify intent and record testimony. Tiana was 16. No lawyer, no charges, just pressure. It wasn't legal, not fully, but it was enough to rattle them. Her father wasn't home. He had flown to DC for a hearing he couldn't cancel. When she told him over the phone, he didn't. Breathe for 5 seconds. Then he said, "Say nothing until I'm back." The next day, she was brought to the precinct. No handcuffs. Just a cold waiting room and a clipboard, with questions she wasn't required to answer, but was still asked to. The officer, a woman in her 30s with a practiced smile, leaned close and said, "You don't want this to go on your record, do you?" Tiana didn't answer. She watched the fluorescent lights flicker above her head, each pulse a quiet reminder that silence didn't mean safety. Across town, her friend Amber stood in front of a classroom, rehearsing a speech about leadership and community values, wearing a blazer her mother had ironed that morning. Tiana sat in an interrogation room, her school bag searched without consent, her rights not fully read, and her future marked with invisible ink. The clip appeared late Friday night. It wasn't edited, wasn't flashy, just a steady, shaky recording from the back of the classroom. The person filming had stayed silent for days, maybe afraid, maybe waiting. But the truth had a sound, and in this case, it was the unmistakable voice of Ms. Kellerman. The video showed everything. Tiana standing at the front of the room, not speaking, not moving. Then the principal stepping in, raising his voice, calling security, and using words the district had denied he ever said. Get her out before this spreads. Not for disruption, not for behavior, but for being a problem they wanted gone before anyone noticed. The video hit social media fast, faster than the school could react. It was raw and damning. Within an hour, local activists reposted it. National accounts followed. Hashtags flipped. The silence that once smothered Tiana cracked, and in its place came noise, real noise. People started asking questions the school didn't want to answer. The same outlets that ran stories painting her as unruly now rushed to cover the leaked footage. But the school wasn't done. They doubled down. Principal Hargrove issued a counter-statement claiming the video was misleading, taken out of context, and part of a smear campaign. They called in a lawyer. The district board backed him publicly. A new narrative was pushed, one that said the video was planted by radical groups seeking to discredit educators. Tiana watched all of it from the living room floor. Her father said nothing, just played the video once more, eyes locked on the moment when she was told to leave, and never looked back. He picked up his phone, called his attorney, and said 5 words. "It's time we go louder." Meanwhile, Ms. Kellerman went silent. No interviews, no appearances. But the story had already shifted. The truth was out. Still, they were preparing for the next strike. Tiana knew it. Her name had become a symbol, but not everyone wanted that symbol to stand. And behind closed doors, the school was planning its next move. More desperate, more dangerous. They weren't finished. They never stopped at just once. The room smelled like old carpet and filtered coffee. 7 people sat behind a long table, all dressed in navy blazers and stiff expressions. Tiana walked in with her back straight and eyes forward, but her hands trembled slightly beneath the cuffs of her sweater. The district's internal review board had called for a closed-door hearing, citing the need to maintain order while evaluating her alleged violations. No press, no family, just her, 1 chair, and a voice recorder on the table. The principal was already seated, flanked by the assistant superintendent and 2 legal representatives. No one offered a greeting. A woman with silver-rimmed glasses leaned into her mic and said, "Miss James, please explain the intent behind your behavior on March 2nd. Tiana blinked. What behavior? Another board member raised his voice. Raising your tone. Refusing. To leave, instigating conflict. She inhaled slowly and replied, I never raised my voice. I never refused to leave. I was told to go without reason. The room paused. Then someone slid a folder forward. Inside were printed screenshots of online posts. Most not even hers, but tagged with her name. They used digital noise to manufacture. Intent. Do you believe your appearance aligns with our district's standard of excellence? One man asked, his tone sharp but rehearsed. Tiana's jaw clenched. She said nothing. That silence was treated as defiance. Your kind always has something to protest, one board member mumbled, not realizing his mic was still live. The room stiffened. No one corrected him. No one apologized. Tiana sat motionless. Outside, her father stood in the hallway, not in his suit, not speaking, just waiting. He wasn't allowed in, not yet. Inside, the vote came fast. The recommendation was to suspend her for the remainder of the semester pending review. No official charge, no due process, just removal, neatly signed. As they stood to leave, one member said, Let's handle this quietly. We can't let this go viral again. Tiana rose, turned to the door and opened it slowly. Her father looked up. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. His eyes already knew. And for the first time, he stepped into the frame. He didn't wear the senator pin. No cameras followed him. No headlines announced his presence. He sat quietly in the back row of the hearing room, a notebook on his lap, and his daughter's silence echoing in his ears. For 40 minutes he said nothing. He watched them dissect her reputation with graphs and policy references. He watched them ignore the video that showed the truth. He watched them erase his daughter with paperwork. When the vote was cast and the room began to clear, he stood. Not with force, not with anger, just purpose. The members froze. They knew his face. Some had shaken his hand at ribbon cuttings. One had donated to his campaign. He walked to the front without being invited. A security officer took a step forward but then stopped, unsure. The senator placed his notebook on the table and opened it. Inside were letters, statements, sworn records from staff who had remained quiet, a transcript of the now viral video, a summary of state education statutes on student rights. He said calmly, We have not filed suit yet. But if this process continues behind closed doors without legal counsel or press transparency, we will. The room fell silent. One board member whispered, This is highly irregular. He replied, So is expelling a child without cause and then lying about it. His voice didn't rise, but it filled the space. He turned to his daughter. She hadn't moved. Her hands were still in her lap. He looked back at the board and said, This is no longer just about her. It's about every student who has been labeled instead of listened to, every parent who wasn't called, every file marked with suspicion instead of truth. Then he reached into his coat and placed his credentials on the table. Let's make this public, he said. The board members stared at the seal, the weight of it undeniable. No one spoke. Outside the room, a local journalist waited, already tipped off. This time the silence belonged to them. The press conference was supposed to clear things. Instead, it ignited something darker. The school district stood firm behind Principal Hargrove, who now shifted the narrative. In front of the cameras, he stated that the student in question had been politically protected and suggested that outside influence was interfering with school policy. He never said her name, he didn't have to. Within hours, a new video began circulating, one spliced together from distorted camera angles and edited hallway footage. It showed Tiana brushing past a teacher, but with no sound, no context, just grainy movement framed as aggression. A narrator's voice was added after the fact. Sources say the student became confrontational and refused multiple instructions. The clip went viral, again. It was traced back to a media account often used by district insiders. No one claimed responsibility. The comments reignited. The slurs returned. This time they added entitled to the list. Meanwhile, someone had filed an anonymous complaint to the Senate Ethics Committee. The accusation, misuse of power, alleging that Senator James had threatened district staff and used government resources to intimidate school employees. It was baseless, but it triggered a preliminary inquiry. News anchors shifted the conversation from student rights to political overreach. Talk shows debated whether public officials should involve themselves in school discipline matters. In the middle of it, Tiana received another blow. A college counselor emailed her privately. Due to recent events, one of her early admissions offers had been paused. Not revoked, just delayed with no timeline. Her father met with his legal team. Documents were disappearing. Emails between school board members had gone silent. A journalist who had previously expressed interest in the story now declined to speak further. He said off record that pressure had come from the top, and in that silence the school moved again. They filed a retroactive disciplinary record, backdated, and uploaded it into the statewide education database. It flagged Tiana as a student of concern. The phrase had no legal weight, but it was enough to trigger red flags in college systems. Her record had been rewritten, not by truth, but by strategy, and the people doing it wore ties, smiled for cameras, and always said they were putting students first. The house felt smaller with the silence. Her mother sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through headlines that made her flinch. Every article added weight to her shoulders. Every news clip chipped at her certainty. She turned to her husband and said the words she'd been holding in for days. "If you don't back off, they'll ruin you. They're already trying." He looked at her but didn't respond. She stood and pointed to the screen. "You think they care about what's right? They're digging up everything. That email from 6 years ago. The campaign flight logs. A photo with someone you don't even remember meeting. They'll twist anything. You're not just a father right now, you're a target." He sat still, hands folded. "She's our daughter," he said. "She's also a minor in a national story, and we're politicians, not activists," she replied. The line was thin and sharp. That night she packed a bag and left for her mother's house. No shouting, no goodbye. Just the sound of a door closing and a car pulling out of the driveway. Tiana watched from the hallway, expression unreadable. She didn't ask where her mother went. She already knew. Hours later, a tip landed in the inbox of a major newspaper. A supposed source claimed the senator had once violated ethics laws by accepting a private donation from a school developer. There was no proof, just timing. The kind of timing that wasn't accidental. Online, it spread fast. Senator covers for daughter amidst scandal. At school, whispers turned to murmurs. A teacher mentioned offhand in the break room, "Guess activism runs in the family." Meanwhile, Tiana sat alone in her room, surrounded by empty frames where awards used to hang. Not taken down in shame, but because even accomplishments had become ammunition. Her father stood by the window, phone buzzing with calls he no longer wanted to answer. His campaign advisor urged him to lay low. His chief of staff warned that donors were pulling back, but he didn't move. He kept looking out as if the answers were in the dark, as if somewhere out there was a line that hadn't yet been crossed. The message came anonymously, a direct email with no subject line and a single video file attached. It landed in the inbox of a junior journalist at a mid-sized news outlet known more for covering community events than national controversies. The reporter almost skipped it, but decided to watch. What played out on screen made her sit forward and replay it twice more. It was audio, grainy but clear enough. A classroom door shut, chairs shuffled, and then a voice, unmistakably male, said, "We need to get rid of that black kid before this blows up." Laughter followed. Then another voice chimed in, "If we don't, it's our jobs next." The file was time-stamped. It matched the morning Tiana had been pulled from her class. The reporter verified the metadata, traced it to a student's phone, then cross-checked it with building schematics. The voices belonged to 2 staff members, both present during the disciplinary hearing. Within an hour, the clip was verified and released. This time the reaction came not from hashtags but from headlines. National outlets picked it up. Civil rights lawyers issued statements. Activists marched outside the school within 24 hours, holding signs that read, "Her hair was just the excuse." The Department of Education issued a federal notice of inquiry. The superintendent held a press briefing that afternoon, his face pale, voice shaking as he announced that the district had placed Principal Hargrove and 2 faculty members on administrative leave pending investigation. Inside the house, Tiana watched without blinking as her name was finally spoken, without slander. Not as a troublemaker, not as a threat, but as a student whose silence had been misinterpreted, whose calm had been punished, and whose dignity had outlasted the noise. Her father sat beside her, jaw tight, hands folded, not celebrating, not relaxing, just watching, because he knew this wasn't justice yet. It was only exposure. Meanwhile, across town, emails poured into the Department of Education. School boards were called into emergency meetings, and families who had stayed quiet for years began to step forward with stories of their own. Tiana's voice was still calm, but now everyone was finally listening. The district office issued a brief statement, careful and legal in tone, confirming that Principal Hargrove had been placed on unpaid leave while an internal audit reviewed his conduct. News spread quickly that he had deleted emails from the week of the expulsion, and those records were recovered through a federal subpoena within 72 hours. Inside those emails were conversations with board members discussing Tiana by name, not in relation to any behavior, but in terms of optics and community backlash. One email read, "If we let this slide, we'll be dealing with protests all year." Another referred to her as a PR liability. A quiet teacher who had remained on the sidelines stepped forward and submitted a signed affidavit confirming that during staff meetings, phrases like "those types of students" were used without correction. By week's end, the superintendent called an emergency press conference. 3 faculty members were removed pending investigation. The assistant principal resigned. One board member, when confronted by press, panicked and blamed political interference, inadvertently revealing he had consulted a campaign advisor before the hearing. The crowd outside the school grew. Tiana did not attend. She stayed, home sitting beside her father as the television played headlines with her name underlined in white. They didn't cheer. They didn't cry. Her father just said quietly, "They're not falling because they were wrong. They're falling because they finally got caught." A knock at the door came that evening. A woman stood there, nervous but resolute. She was a cafeteria worker, never mentioned, never filmed. She held out a notebook filled with dates and entries detailing what she had overheard in the teacher's lounge for the past year. She said, "It wasn't just you." Her statement triggered a wider inquiry. Soon stories surfaced from other students, other families, patterns of coded discipline and selective punishment. One of the students who came forward was a quiet junior who had watched Tiana from afar and decided her silence had meaning. In the local papers, the district was now described as under federal review for civil rights violations. But within that storm, a final detail surfaced. A councilwoman confirmed that a senior board member responsible for much of the internal maneuvering was an old friend of Tiana's mother and had been feeding doubts into their household for months. The betrayal was quiet but deep. It wasn't just the system that cracked, it was the trust inside the family that had allowed it to linger. The district offered a formal apology, not through a press conference but in an email forwarded late at night with no subject line. It stated that Tiana's record had been cleared, her suspension reversed, and that she was welcome to return to campus immediately. They included her name in the honors program again, restored her digital credentials, and added a note in bold: "The student was not at fault." No one signed it. No one called. The principal was gone. The teacher resigned. One board member quietly stepped down without comment. The system had folded in public, but not with accountability, only silence. A week later, a school official reached out to ask if Tiana would consider returning for the end-of-year assembly. They said it would be a good opportunity for closure. She declined. Instead, she requested to complete her studies through independent coursework. The hallways of that school had turned her name into a headline. She saw no reason to walk them again. Her father withdrew from his re-election campaign 2 days later. The announcement was short. He stated that he was choosing to step away from politics to focus on what mattered most. Reporters called it a quiet fall from grace. They didn't understand. It wasn't a fall, it was a choice. The same kind his daughter had made when she refused to walk back into a place that erased her. That weekend, they sat together on the back porch. Tiana held the acceptance letter from one of the colleges that had initially pulled their offer. It was back, this time with a scholarship. She hadn't decided yet. The silence between them wasn't heavy, just full. He finally said, "You didn't speak, and you still changed everything." She answered, "I didn't want to become anything. I just wanted to be seen." Across town, a new student policy committee was being formed. Her name was mentioned as a possible advisor. She hadn't decided on that either. But she had written something, one sentence, printed and taped above her desk. It read, "You wanted to teach me a lesson. Now the whole country is learning it." Months passed. The noise faded, but the echo remained. Tiana stood at the podium of the National Youth Summit on Justice and Education, the room lit in gold, the crowd quiet with attention, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. She didn't wear a blazer. She didn't recite the story. She simply read what she had written in the margin of a notebook during the hearings when no one had listened. Her voice was steady. "If a system needs silence to survive, then maybe it was never built for us." She paused. No one clapped. Not yet. The room was too still for that. A few leaned forward. A teacher in the back lowered his eyes. A journalist stopped typing. She stepped down from the stage, walked past the line of organizers, and disappeared behind the curtain. Her father watched from the second row, his hands still, no camera crew behind him, no security detail. Just a man in the audience. Outside, the sky was soft with clouds. The noise of the world returned in the form of passing cars and murmured interviews. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Across the country, new school districts were reviewing their policies. Students who once stayed quiet began raising questions. A classroom in Oregon added a unit on student rights. A young girl in Florida sent Tiana a letter with just one line. "Your silence helped me speak." At home, her mother returned. No grand scene, no apology spoken aloud. Just dinner made and the lights left on in the hallway. Not everything heals with fire. Some things settle like dust, soft and unseen. And somewhere deep in the school's storage system, an old surveillance clip remained, never shown, never erased. It captured the moment a student was told to leave for how she looked and chose instead to stay standing. Her name was no longer a case file. It was a sentence others finished when they were too tired to explain what dignity costs. And that was the ending. Not triumphant, not tragic, just true. A story that didn't need a final word. Only a question. Did the system fall, or did it simply survive her?